house for daring to say the unsayable.
You know, to be blunt about it, the Treasury, and indeed just about every other organisation here and across the world, was simply not prepared. They were not expecting what was about to break on them.
Shares plummet after the collapse of Lehman Brothers, one of America's biggest investment banks.
The Lehman's crash transformed its chairman overnight from hero to zero. In London, at the Lehman's building that Gordon Brown had opened alongside Dick Fool, the youthful masters of the universe were out on their heels. And the Lehman's collapse threatened to send the whole global banking system into meltdown. The most vulnerable British bank was RBS, which had lent billions of pounds against worthless, toxic assets.
I remember on the day that it was obvious that RBS just couldn't carry on, being phoned up by a couple of its top people, and listening to someone with panic in their voice saying, "We can't go beyond lunchtime." And you thought, this is one of the biggest banks in the world, and they're telling me that they don't think we can carry on. And having me speaking to the governor of the Bank of England saying, "Look, we've got to do whatever it takes to keep this bank going." In my experience, if you're faced with a situation like that, there's two things you can do. You can panic, which is daft, or you can get on with it and sort it out.
The Treasury and Number 10 scrabbled to put together a plan to bail out the banks. Traditional caution was thrown to the wind as they poured eye-wateringly large sums of taxpayers' money into the package.
In the Treasury, people were working non-stop for days on end. They were working overnight to make sure that on the Monday morning when we announced the recapitalisation, that the banks were open for business. Now, that was a crisis. It meant that people had to work flat out, they had to draw on their reserves, they had to explain to domestic things to their families why they hadn't been home for several days, because the world banking system was standing on the very brink. It was looking over the edge. We were in a situation which would have been unthinkable, where the bank doors couldn't have opened, the cash machines wouldn't have functioned. All over the world, people couldn't have got money. It would have been catastrophic.
Mr. Speaker, the first point of recapitalisation was to save banks that would otherwise have collapsed. And we not only saved the world, saved the banks, and saved the banks and led the way.
Brown's Freudian slip gave the Tories a field day. At Westminster, they staged a tableau for the cameras, showing Britain struggling with by far its greatest public debt burden in our history. The Treasury would now have to try and balance the books. But how far did its mandarins feel that the Treasury itself was responsible for Britain's latest and greatest post-war economic orgy?
Yeah, it has been a huge failure. It's a failure of imagination and a failure to say, well, wait a minute, the levels of borrowing, the levels of borrowing by governments, the levels of borrowing by individuals, the levels of borrowing by banks, the levels of borrowing by companies are all getting too big. And yes, I mean, that was a failure.
There wasn't a regulator in the world, there wasn't a treasury in the world, there wasn't anyone, central bank, there wasn't anyone in the world who could hand in heart say, we saw it all coming. And if they did, I'd dearly like to know why they never said. They didn't see it coming. And I think collectively, we have to accept responsibility for that. Every country in the world has the same problem. But, as an institution of the Treasury, I think the criticism which, our own secretary here has recognised is that, after 10 years of stability, it wasn't surprising that we didn't keep hundreds of civil servants, scanning the horizon for these things.
It seemed that Treasury mandarins themselves, like their political masters, had had their heads turned by the greatest banking bubble in our history. And the gap between the Treasury's own lofty self-esteem and its actual performance when routine turned to orgy was once again profound.
There's another chance to catch this week's brand new drama tonight here on BBC4, when Anna Maxwell Martin and Brian Cox star in On Expenses. That's here at 10:30. And next tonight, Charlie's here to tell us all about Newswipe. Coming up just a few short moments.
Hello BBC4 viewer, you're a sophisticate. That's why you're going to be hanging around for the special creme de la creme episode of Newswipe that's coming up next on this channel, right now.
Prepare for the power and passion of another Six Nations weekend, beginning with Wales v France, Italy v Scotland, and England v Ireland. The Six Nations continues tomorrow at 7:55 on BBC One, BBC HD, and Radio 5 Live.
There's another chance to see this week's brand new drama here on BBC4 in half an hour. On Expenses is here at 10:30. But first, there's probably going to be some strong language as we look back over the best of this last series of Charlie Brooker's Newswipe.
Hello, I'm Charlie Brooker and you're watching a special compilation episode of Newswipe, which starts with a brisk and, dare I say it, amusing look at how the job of TV news journalists has grown more sophisticated over the years. Early news reports were painstakingly constructed using cumbersome equipment, which meant the resulting films themselves were often quotidian, murky, shoddily framed snooze fests about brown rivers and closing factories. As technology improved, news reports became snazzier, more mobile, more visually playful. Before long, a standard news report visual language established itself, one that's immediately recognisable to anyone. Me has this report. It starts here with a lacklustre